The next thing I know, I've left my body. I'm now floating above myself, looking down at me on the sofa. And I just sort of floated up through the ceiling. And then I was somewhere else. Like, I was me, but I had no physical body. I still kind of maintained who I was, my consciousness. But yeah, I was in a different place.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cindy Cromblehome, and I'm super excited to have Richard here with me today. Richard Newman has been with the school for some time. We've walked a journey together. So I'm really excited about him being part of the Energy Healing Conversations and the Spiritual Awakening series. Today, we're going to dive deep into addiction, breakdown, and near-death experience. Richard, I'd love you to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, hi everybody. My name is Richard. I'm a healer. I trained with the school. Very blessed to do so. I'm also a sound healer, qigong instructor, and a yoga instructor.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. We share a similar story of addiction, but we share a really different pathway of getting there. I'd love you to talk about before you became sober, before your first recovery, because there are a couple of recoveries in your story. And or even because I like to call the first one a recovery and maybe the second one a healing, and do that. So let's talk about your first, before when you were using. Tell us what life was like. Where did it begin?
The examples that I had of people consuming alcohol and substances, people that I grew up with, my family, could be seen as excessive. And that was kind of the example that I was given. So I followed along in those footsteps, but no one ever suggested that we may be overdoing it slightly. So, and all of the behaviors that come with that, the chaos and the arguments and the destruction and hurting those that you care about. So I've followed along in that. So what I was doing, the way that I was drinking and taking substances growing up, wasn't dissimilar from the people that I was with for quite a long time. So it was just kind of fun, I guess. Like I was enjoying myself. Yeah, probably took it a bit too far, got into some trouble and that kind of thing. But again, I didn't really stand out. There was a time, I can't really pinpoint when it was, but I think it was somewhere around my mid-20s when it went from, this is something that I do and maybe I hit it a bit harder than everybody else, to I would go out, experience the evening with everybody else, have a great time, then be unable to stop and then go and continue by myself at home on my own because I wasn't finished. That then kind of evolved into wanting to spend less time with people and more time just being at home doing what I wanted to do in the way that I wanted to do it, free from judgment and prying eyes. And it just kind of, it progressed to the stage where I just stopped wanting to be around people, and it kind of became, by the end, it was the cause of and the solution to all of my problems. It was the reason I had no money, the reason I couldn't hold down a relationship or a job, but it was also the only thing that was kind of getting me through at that time. So it was, it was a bit of a messy situation, which I had absolutely no idea how to fix, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, tell me, your drug of choice, was it drugs or alcohol? And kind of like they're drugs and then addictions are different levels, aren't they? I think it's a bit like the spectrum. There's a spectrum of addiction. And so how dark and so first of all, what was the drug of choice? And then how dark was that world, that inner world for you?
So alcohol was a mainstay for me from pre-teen years. It's been in my life since I can remember. So that was kind of number one. It varied over the years. Like it started with cannabis, but cocaine was the main thing for me. if I couldn't get, it would be whatever I could get my hands on, but it was mainly cocaine and alcohol were sort of the main choices, I guess, for what was most effective. And yeah, what I've learned with regards to, say, the kind of the levels of where this can go, for myself at least, is there are a lot of people out there that kind of drank and used in a similar fashion to what I did, but when they were given a sufficient reason to stop, they were able to control, moderate, or just kind of stop altogether if things got bad enough, like they were going to lose their job or their home or their relationship, and they were kind of faced with these consequences. They still had enough about them to kind of, curb what they were doing. For me, when faced with those circumstances, I got worse. And I'd sort of lost the power of choice, was not there anymore. It wasn't optional. It had to happen. And it was completely out of control. And there were very brief windows of kind of feeling okay. But for the most part, it was just me stuck inside myself, unable to interact with people, live a normal life. It was the first and last thought on my mind is, what do I have to do to get what I need to get to be able to make it through the day? It's and the things that you have to do to maintain a lifestyle like that put you in some pretty sketchy situations with some unsavory characters, and it's not a nice lifestyle. It's not like just spending some of your disposable income on a few beers and a bottle of wine. It's like, I've spent everything, I've got no money, so now I have to engage in behaviors to get money, to beg, borrow, steal, whatever I need to kind of fund what I feel that I have to do at that time. It became all consuming. It's not it wasn't a hobby. It was complete lifestyle of darkness, really.
Darkness. And what led to your first recovery, or your first healing? What happened?
So I wasn't blind to the consequences that were coming from my using, and I wanted to do something about it because I wanted the consequences to stop. I didn't want to keep losing jobs. I didn't want to keep losing relationships and having nowhere to live. So to make that happen, the idea that I had was, well, it's the substances that are the problem. So if I can do something to put those down, I will be fine and life will be great. And I'll be able to, kind of sail off into the sunset and everything will be all right. So I sought help specifically just to put the substances down. It wasn't to do any inner work on myself, because I didn't see me as the problem. I just saw the external, it's the substances that are the issue. That was what led me to attempt to make some changes. So I started with getting some hypnotherapy for my cocaine problem, whilst lying about how much I was drinking. So then that kind of took over, but I wasn't taking the drug that was the problem. So I thought I was doing okay when in fact I wasn't. Things were kind of spiraling. Until I went through various cycles of seeking help for drugs and alcohol, until I sort of reached the idea that, well, maybe I have to stop everything. I wasn't able to pick and choose. If I could put one down and manage the rest, I wasn't able to manage anything at all. And it became, let's say, things had to get bad enough, I think it was becoming a life and death situation. It was affecting my mental health in a very severe way. It was affecting my physical health. I was vomiting blood, pains in my liver, my kidneys would ache in the morning. I was in a bit of a bad way. So it was kind of fix up, or this could be it. And I wasn't ready to go yet. So unfortunately, it had to get that bad for me to want to make changes.
Mm-hmm. And did you spend time in AA at this time? Were the rooms part of your recovery?
Yes, they were. So when I realized that I had to put everything down, then yeah, the only thing that I was aware of that could help with any of that was 12-step recovery. So I did attend most of the fellowships. The majority of the time I spent was in Cocaine Anonymous, which isn't drug specific, but it had what I was all about in the name. So that's what drew me in there. So yeah, I spent maybe 4 years in there. That was the first real kind of catalyst for change. That was when things shifted in a dramatic way in my life.
And so yeah, that's really interesting that you went through that process, which is a helpful community, and it gives a lot of, and I mean, it supported so many millions of people. I have huge respect for the program and doing that. So did life change? Did you get relationships after that? Did things start coming into a place of a bit of harmony, a bit of respite for you?
Yeah, things shifted a lot. I mean, early days of anybody who is, in the grips of addiction, the first period of time when you put all that stuff down and you're just left with yourself becomes extremely uncomfortable, but I was in the program and I learned new ways of being able to cope with life. So things did settle down. I was able to maintain a job. I was being of service. I was helping other people. I was engaged in external therapies. I had counselling for about 2 years, entered into a long-term relationship, which at that time was the healthiest relationship I'd ever experienced. So things completely shifted for me being in recovery at that time. And also the program introduced me to spirituality. They speak of God, and the 12-step program is a spiritual solution, which was something that I didn't really understand at the time, but I had some experiences within those first months that proved to me that there were powers greater than me at play here, and there was something else going on. And I was, if I made the efforts to connect with whatever I felt that was, then things were able to change once I got outside of myself and was able to connect in that way. So it was a huge, huge shift, complete 180 from where I was.
I'm curious around, and I've just been on a call with somebody, and we've been talking about powerlessness and how actually acknowledging that there's something greater than ourselves. And I'd love you to just explain, because I think there's so much learning in understanding powerlessness. How did you experience that the first time?
It's a difficult thing to accept. It was for me at that time, because it meant that I had to humble myself enough to admit that, in the situation that I was in, I had the power to change it, and I had to reach outside of myself. Um, I had a very profound experience within that, which completely turned everything for me. And it was my first, I would say, real conscious interaction with that power that's greater than me, which gave me more than hope that, things could change. So I was in a very, very dark place. I was having lots of intrusive thoughts about ending my own life, and it was getting very, very difficult to kind of not act on those. And I'd been in the rooms for a couple of weeks at this point. And everyone was kind of talking about God and praying and powerlessness and reaching out to a power greater than yourself. And I backed myself into a corner where I sort of had no choice. It was, I was getting to a stage where I felt like I was going to take my own life. And I reached out honestly and humbly and truly for the first time kind of pleaded with a God that I didn't think existed. Hoped that they did, and hoped that they may care enough about me to kind of do something about it, and pleaded for this thing to be lifted off of me, because I didn't want to die. I wanted to stay here, and like, I will go to the meetings and I'll do all the work that I need to do. Please just help me. And within that moment, I felt this weight be lifted off of my shoulders. And it was like the lights got turned up in the room. It was so life-changing. It was like I pleaded humbly and honestly with God, and came instantly in that moment and gave me what I needed to get through the day. So then I was able to put in the work that I needed to do to make the change. I think like the powerlessness, especially with regards to addiction, it's powerless around the particular substance or the drink. It doesn't mean that me as a person in my own life that I am powerless, because I have the power to get up, to go to a meeting, to contact somebody, to ask for help, to engage in a process, to meditate, to pray, to do all of these things. So I do have a lot of power and responsibility to make the change. It's just around, if I have that first one, I'm completely powerless over the outcome of that. So that's where the spiritual aspect comes in. So yeah, it's powerless over drink and drugs, not completely powerless as an individual. So yeah, it's important to kind of not disempower myself within that word, which is why it was quite difficult for me to accept at the time, because it took some humility.
And that your mental body, at some point, the noise in your head had to stop. Because you talk about the noise in your head, right?
Yes, there was a lot of that.
So 4 years, relationship, back working, you're starting to reap and get the harvest of the work you had done in the rooms. You were working the program. I'm guessing you had some sponsees, you were helping others. So what happened? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I had all of those things going on that you mentioned there. I was helping people, you know, I felt fulfilled. I had purpose. Life was good. Wasn't without its struggles, of course, because, you know, life continues whether I'm sober or whether I'm not. But everything did feel kind of stable at that time. Unfortunately, I mean, my dad wasn't very well for a long time, but he passed away suddenly, which was an extremely difficult thing to work through, to process. I mean, me and my uncle went to his place and kind of found him there just after he'd gone. So having to handle all of that stuff was extremely difficult. But, you know, I remained sober. I was still in the program. I still had the fellowship around me. I still had my relationship at that time. And everything was stable outside of that until it wasn't. 4 days before the funeral, my girlfriend at the time comes home, ends a relationship completely from nowhere, makes me homeless in that moment. I have nowhere to go. And I'm just about to bury my dad. And it's like this whole thing. And it was incredibly difficult, like the hardest time I think I'd ever been through in my life up until that point. But I remained sober through all of that with the tools that I had and the fellowship around me, and everything was challenging, but I was sharing it along the way, and it was helping. My story was helping other people, and I was able to inspire others throughout that. A couple of months afterwards, I was at a CA convention in London, and I was part of the committee that set that convention up and put it on. I was the opening speaker on the Saturday. So speaking to a crowded room full of people, it was quite stressful. There were like hundreds of people there. It was a big moment. It went really well. Everything was fine. The following day, I woke up in the morning, still at the convention in the hotel, and I just didn't feel right. And then all of a sudden, I'm hearing voices in my head that weren't mine. You know, I'm having like physical twitches and tics, and I'm kind of making involuntary noises. Things just fell apart, completely unraveled. ended up in hospital. They sent me home after a little while, did some checks. Things didn't improve. And then I called for help again, and then they came. And yeah, I had to spend some time in a mental health institution for a couple of weeks at that moment. And yeah, because of given the hallucinations that I was experiencing, auditory and visual, they diagnosed me with psychosis. Um, I was still sober at the time, I was still sober throughout that, which was difficult. Was heavily medicated, wasn't getting any better, and things were just, yeah, life felt like it had fallen apart at that moment. Kept it together for a while until I didn't. And then, yeah, that was when I picked up again for the first time in a long time.
So how long was it? You'd been sober for 4 years, and then you went straight to drugs. You started drinking.
So the first thing, so what happened was it was the day that we laid my dad's ashes to rest. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to have a few lines. And that's it. I'm going to have a good time today because I can and I deserve it, and I don't care. I'm going to have a beer and a few lines, and everything will be fine. And then I'll start again tomorrow. Clean slate, we'll go again. So I did that. There was no fun. There was no enjoyment. It was that first beer instantly took me back to the horrifically dark place that I was in 4 years before when I had my last drink. There was no steady decline. It was had the first one and it was just straight back in that same hole. So, I got through that night and was like, I'm not doing that again. That was not fun. But unfortunately, I'd opened the door and I wasn't able to close it when I wanted to. And this is where it's a curious thing about addiction. And, I think only people that have kind of been in this particular place can truly understand, because logically it doesn't seem to make sense to a lot of people. Within myself, in that moment, I was done. I did not ever want to drink and use again. But I also knew that I wasn't done. I wanted to be finished, but this addiction thing in my brain was not finished yet. So I knew it was going to happen again, regardless of how hard I fought against it. And I did fight hard against it, but, it led to this kind of procession of a week clean, 30 days, a week, 60 days, and just kind of this in and out, back and forth, unable to maintain any kind of level of sobriety. I'm still heavily medicated on, antipsychotic and antidepressant medication at this time. I was using those in ways that I wasn't prescribed, and, taking all sorts of other stuff, and things just spiraled over the course of about 6 months. And yeah, it culminated in a pretty rough day. So, my intention was to go out and just have a couple of beers on a Friday lunchtime. That intention was not realized. I started and was unable to stop for, I think it was until like Sunday. And yeah, in the early hours of Sunday morning, I accidentally overdosed and yeah, passed on. My heart stopped and my body died in that moment. It was an experience that I was fully aware of, but was unable to do anything about. It was kind of traumatic and peaceful at the same time. It's quite a paradoxical thing. I was laying there, I was unable to move, and I could just feel my body shutting down. My heart would kind of do this arrhythmia, this crazy irregular heartbeat, and then stop, and then do it again, and then stop. And the gaps in between just became longer and longer to the point where it stopped. And it was almost like I felt this wave move up my body. And it wasn't like a numbness. It was almost like my body disappeared as this wave moved up me. And then, yeah, the next thing I know, I've left my body. I'm now floating above myself, looking down at me on the sofa. And I just sort of floated up through the ceiling. And then I was somewhere else. Like I was me, but I had no physical body. I still kind of maintained who I was, my consciousness. But yeah, I was in a different place. And the only way I can describe where I ended up in that moment was it was home. And it felt like home in a way that I've never felt at home before in my life. You know, I didn't see any like physical, I didn't see anything physical. It was just pure energy and pure love and joy. I mean, those words don't really do that place justice. But I became aware of so many things in that moment. Like I knew this was where I come from. And I knew this is where we all come from. And this is where everyone that has passed has returned to. And there is nothing to fear. And it was incredible. Like it felt like I was everything everywhere all at once. You know, the title of that film, it's true. That's exactly how I felt. I knew so much in an instant. I could see kind of the whole passage of time. It was just magical. And I kind of wanted to stay there, to be honest. It felt great.
I'm curious because I'm going to stop you here, having personally experienced a near-death experience. So I'm going to ask a question which either you can or you can't answer, but let's try anyway. At what point and why did your soul choose to come back into a body, an emotional body, a physical body, an emotional body, a mental body, and a spiritual body? What was the reason for your soul choosing to that was riddled with addiction? Yeah, that was suffering the pain and die if I do, die if I don't. Why do you think your soul chose to come back? And what, talk us through that a little bit, if you can, just to give the people, you know, watching this or listening to this some context of that feeling.
So after being, you know, home for some time, I was presented with a question, which was, do you want to stay or do you want to go? There was no judgment. It was completely up to me. And I sat with that question. I don't know how long for, but, you know, I was processing, if I stay here, everything's fine. Like it's done. The problems are over. I'm blissed out. This is wonderful. Like, well, I don't need to go back. It can all be finished right here. No more pain, no more suffering. Reunited with, you know, with family, with source, with everything, with all that is. But even in that moment of experiencing that place and wanting to stay, I couldn't do that to my family. I couldn't go out like that. I couldn't be found in that way. It would have been, because if I stayed there, I was found in the state that I was in. My pain is over. I'm happy. I'm blissful. I'm free. They then have to clean up all of that mess that I've left behind. And I knew that that would have been the most selfish act I would have ever committed in my entire life. So I chose to come back. I chose to come back. You know, I made a decision. I said, I want to return. I'm not done. I don't know. And then it was all, I just kind of woke up. A long time had passed and I was back.
So I've got one question. Prior to that, with the antipsychotic medication, did the voices and the visions stop, or were they still happening?
The medication did absolutely nothing to help with the voices and the visuals. Like yeah, I don't think well, I know they didn't help. It's possible that they even made things worse. They became, they were like physical sedatives, but didn't do anything for the voices in my head and for what I was seeing. It made it harder because it felt like I was kind of physically trapped. I was sedated and wasn't really able to move around and was kind of drifting in and out and falling asleep a lot. But yeah, it was still there. Didn't do anything, regardless of how much they upped the dosage. Nothing changed.
So lead us through the events that happened after this difficult situation. You know, you've had a taste of home, what home is. And you're now back in your body. I'm guessing the ambulance came. What happened from there? Tell us, you know, because clearly you're here today a different guy. And so there must have been a sequence of events that happened after this for you to still be with us, of which I'm very grateful for, by the way. And I'm glad you made that choice.
Me too. Me too. So I was actually alone when this happened, and when I came back into my body, I was still alone, and it was just like the next day, and I was awake, and I don't know how. And it was a lot. I think maybe several hours had passed, and I was just kind of conscious again, and it was bizarre. And I just sort of woke up and got up. Really, it was so strange. So nobody was there. So no one called for help. I didn't actually call for any help either, to be honest. I just sort of struggled to process what had just happened and sort of reintegrate. So yeah, I did a lot of sleeping for a few days. I had a new zest for life and a new level of gratitude for everything. Like food tasted better than it had ever tasted in my life. The same meals I'd eaten every day never tasted that good because I was back and I was here. And yeah, everything was amazing and wonderful. And then it kind of got to a point where it sort of felt a little futile almost. It's like, well, you know, if there's all of this other stuff going on, what does this even really mean? It was a rough, it was a rough integration to kind of like, how do you go and do your weekly shop after an experience like that? You know, walking around the supermarket, it's like, what is this? Um, so yeah, it was tricky. And it's been a long process to sort of fully accept being back here and being able to navigate life in the way that I can today. But so yeah, within that, you know, I was still on this medication, but I was still experiencing these things. I still had the voices and I still had the hallucinations visually as well. But I had a feeling, I had this gut instinct, this intuition after the near-death experience. I kind of knew that this wasn't a medical problem anymore. Well, I say anymore. I knew it wasn't a medical problem. So I'm like, okay, cool. So what do I do now? Because I don't know anything about who do I go to? I didn't know what healer was. I didn't understand anything. Very, very close friend of mine is like a brother to me. He was with me throughout, you know, all of this difficult period in my life. I spoke to him about it. He recommended a healer to me. He's like, speak to this guy. He will be able to help you. Like, he knows what's going on. Turns out, you know, he's affiliated with the school, did the course many years ago. So I had a chat with this guy, got in touch with him, laid it all out, told him this is the situation. I don't feel like this is a medical problem. But I don't know what it means if it isn't. He then, so we had the conversation. He then went away and did his investigations, which I didn't know what that meant at the time. But, you know, he kind of tuned in and asked some questions and came back with some information for me about what he found when he went seeking answers about my situation. And he told me that I wasn't hallucinating. What I was experiencing were actually attachments that were speaking to me. and causing me all of this distress. And what I was seeing weren't hallucinations either. So it turns out that I had these psychic abilities that I had never heard of before and didn't understand anything about. He told me that these things can be cleared from my energy and that we needed to do some energy management, which again was a completely alien concept to me that I didn't understand anything about. So we kind of went on that journey together where he did a clearing on me. He did clearing on the house that I was living in at the time. And it was like a magic switch had been flipped, because instantly silence in my head. I don't remember it ever being quiet my whole life. And it was just nothing. And I felt all right for the first time in a very long time. And it felt like magic. You know, the house felt different. I felt different. You know, he made it quite clear to me, like, I'm not a doctor. I'm telling you what I found. I'm not telling you to stop your medication. So, you know, I went through the process of coming off of that gradually with the help of medical professionals. I didn't just, you know, cut that out. And yeah, I learned about energy management, and I learned about me and my energy, and that I'm sensitive and I can pick up on other stuff, and the fact that maybe what I'm feeling or thinking might not be mine. I might be picking that up from somebody else. And it was mind blowing, all of these things he was telling me. So yeah, I got some basic energy management skills, had these things cleared from my energy, did this practice at least twice a day, every day, came off the medication, and the voices never came back. Not the hallucinations, but the visuals, this specific thing that I kept seeing never came back.
It's incredible how something as complex and yet the resolution can be quite simple. However, what I would say is I think there were enough. It wasn't just you went to see a healer and all of a sudden it went away. There had been a build up of your energy shifting, like from the spiritual awakening to connecting to an energy greater than yourselves, working the program, helping others, and then really coming to this, this massive choice point in your life that, I mean, most people don't get that choice point of, do I stay or do I go? But you got that, and you chose not to leave a carnage of mess behind you for others. And so you choose to stay, and you're guided. Your higher power sends you to a spirit release expert, who is able to release these attachments and clear that. So I don't think it was just, for any, and just any listeners, if you are watching, if you do have voices in your head, first and foremost, please go and see somebody who can help you. And then we are happy to support, and you can reach out to us. I just need to be clear that these things work together. And although both have pluses and minuses, I think we just need to be clear that one still needs to get professional diagnosis, and spiritual shamans are really useful and beneficial to these things, but we work together with that. Back to the rooms, Richard. Did you go back to the rooms for a while and kind of lead us to the story where you then, in your own right, go through a process of learning to do what happened to you, if that makes sense? You then, sort of take us through kind of the next chapter, because it's not the last, because we continue to learn. But let's go to the next chapter.
So yeah, after that, things had changed significantly. As I said, I had some new practices. I was still engaged with the fellowship, with the 12-step recovery. I went and did some traveling, and I had peace in my life. I'd never felt such peace like it for, life was just great for probably 18 months or so. I did start to slowly step back from the 12-step recovery, because I felt that given where I got to the last time that I had a beer, that ended up in my life being over and, being led to this choice point. So there were no more questions for me about, oh, what would happen if I have one? It's like, well, one means life is over and I don't want that to happen. So, it removed all questions for me regarding substances. I had a new, deeper understanding of life. I had a connection with a power greater than me, deeper than I had ever had before, and a new understanding and a peek behind the curtain. So with all of that, being in a 12-step meeting regularly and sort of speaking about the problem, they do speak obviously of the solution as well, but kind of going over that, talking about what it used to be like 3 times a week, didn't feel helpful to me. It felt like it was kind of keeping me in that energy that I'm actively moving away from. So over a period of time, I started to sort of go less and less. It felt like I was feeding the beast almost. It's like, well, if I don't do this anymore and it's not part of my life and I'm going this way, why am I still speaking about the problem that's not the problem anymore? It's not the defining thing in my life. So yeah, I started to step away from that. My own personal spiritual practices became deeper. But I was still I was confused about what I wanted to do with my life, because what I'd done up until that point, I'm qualified in many different trades. I'm a very skillful man. I can do a lot of different stuff. None of those things really fulfilled me. They didn't really match my purpose. And I'm like, okay, I can do all of these things, but I don't really want to. So what do I actually want to do? I went traveling for a few months and was trying to figure that out while I was away. Blessed to be able to travel solo and be all right, given where I'd come from. It was incredible. So while I was away, I remember so clearly, I was walking down the street in Bangkok and I was hit with this message, is the only way I can describe it. Like, I've had gut feelings before and intuition and stuff like that. This stopped me in my tracks. And it said, you need to go home. There's work to do. And I've never experienced anything like that before. So I was like, it was so unavoidable, to the point where I booked a flight home that afternoon and I left and I flew home. I didn't know what I was flying home to, but I fully trusted what I received, and during my travels, with the understanding that I have certain sensitivities and, abilities, which were now firmly managed, I did think to myself that, well, if I have these skills and abilities, but I just spend the rest of my life with them, I don't know if shut down is the right word, but I'm not utilizing them and I'm just concentrating on my energy management and I'm cool and I'm moving through life and I'm peaceful, I feel like I can help some people here. So I came back and began looking at training, some courses, like what can I do? How can I use the skills that I have? How do I hone them? How do I unlock them? How do I go deeper with this stuff? Like, I didn't know what to do. So I started doing some research and yeah, I came across the healing course with the School of Intuition and Healing. And of everything that I'd read, there are so many courses out there. I read what this was all about and I was like, that's it. Got online, booked an interview with yourself, Cindy, and it was a couple of days before the closing of, applications for the course that was about to start, I think in April or March time. And it was very close to kind of the cutoff date. So it was just like literally came back, landed, did some research, found this thing, found the course, booked the interview. 2 days later, I had a chat with Cindy and bang, I'm on the course. So I'm like, okay, wow, this welcome home. I just kind of hit the ground at full sprint and was just off and running. I'm like, right, what else can I do? What else can I do? you know, and I was practicing a lot of qigong at that time, and I'm like, okay, cool. Well, let's find a training course. Let's do some teacher training for that as well. So I booked onto a teacher training course, and I'd hit this turning point again in my life of where, how do I take my personal passions and skills and use them to be of benefit to other people and to go deeper with myself along the process? And that was kind of when this training arc of my life began a few years back, and it's been an incredible ride since then. So yeah, like huge shifts. It's just been, you know, this, my life up until this point has been, it feels like many lifetimes in one. I've experienced so much, and it just keeps changing, and I love it.
And Richard, that's really, really fantastic, because I know you are still, if you want, doing a step 12 and working and working with people in addiction, just in a slightly different way. So in a way, you know, I think the base of the program, you know, has given depth and interest, but also your spiritual growth, and really unpacking all those little dustbins. You know, you really went and dig deep in the dustbins to find peace and to still that noise and those wounds. So congratulations for that. I'm going to ask the last question, which I ask on every podcast. If people, and I think with you it's slightly different, you know, if people are really struggling with addiction, I'd like to ask you what would you suggest, and then also if people have a spiritual awakening, you know, what advice would you give them today? Like they're the same, but they're separate.
Okay. So with regards to the addiction, as much as I personally am now not actively involved in 12-step recovery, for me, that was the start point. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. So I have nothing bad to say about that, right? So for any behavior or substance, there is a fellowship for that. It's all based on the 12 steps of AA. It's, if you think that you're alone in what you're doing, there are rooms full of people that have done and are engaged in exactly what you're doing, and they all know the way out of the dark hole that you're sat in, and they will come and sit in it with you and guide you out of there. So I implore anybody to look at 12-step recovery for whatever it is that they have going on in that respect. With the spiritual awakening and kind of what to do next, it can be a difficult place to be, because you know, it can get a bit messy. Spiritual awakenings can feel a lot like breakdowns at times. I would say there are many options of things to do. You know, whether you want to become a healer or you want to understand yourself on a deeper level and truly get to know who you are and understand spirituality on every level comprehensively, the makeup of your own energetic anatomy, the healing course is the one. Like, the healing course with the school is absolutely the one, you know. And there are loads of free resources online. There's master classes, there's energy management, there's an energy management day coming up. Like, check that out. That's number one, energy management, and then you build from there. But if you really want to go deep and understand you and life and, you know, the other realms, then 100% the healing course. You know, that should be, I think that's like mandatory higher education for every human being. If that happened, we'd all be fine.
Well, I have to say, Richard, I don't disagree with you. I think everyone should do it as a transformational program, but then also having a way to hold space for others and heal others. So I can't disagree. But Richard, I want to say thank you so much for your vulnerability, your honesty, and just sharing your experience, you know. And if there's anyone who's heard anything, needs some help, support, please reach out. Richard's details are below. And also, please, if I can ask you just to like this, so we can get this story to more people, because there are many people out there who really suffer from voices in their heads, and visions, but also people, addiction is alive and well. And, there are different ways out. So please reach out to us. We're happy to help and support you. And you can always book a chat with me. Richard, thank you so much for coming on and doing this podcast at 33 degrees. We're currently in the heat wave in London. So thank you for still showing up as you always do. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on, and yeah, it's an honor to share my story. And I hope someone somewhere finds something from it. So yeah, reach out. We're here.